Battle of Zhovti Vody was the first significant battle of the Khmelnytsky Uprising. The name of the battle derived from a nearby Zhovta River. The events took place about 20 miles north of Zhovti Vody, today on the border of Kirovohrad Oblast and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast in south-central Ukraine, when advance forces of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth army led by Stefan Potocki met a numerically superior force of Ukrainian Cossacks and Crimean Tatars under the command of Bohdan, Khmelnytsky and Tuhaj. Bej.After the registered Cossacks, who were originally allied with the Commonwealth, arrived and unexpectedly sided with Khmelnytsky, the Commonwealth forces were vanquished while attempting to retreat following an 18-day battle, only days before reinforcements were to arrive. Events leading to the battle. Preparation for the war with the Ottomans. With the death of Hetman Stanislaw Konyspolsky in March 1646, and without the knowledge of his successor Hetman Mykolai Potocki, King Vladislav IV Vasa established direct relations with the Cossacks, concerning the wrongs and injustices that they were suffering. In April 1646, after meeting with the Cossack officers, Vladislav IV Vasa secretly chartered them for rallying up the Cossack army for the upcoming campaign against the Crimean Khanate, increased the size of the Zaporozhian host to 12,000, and gave them 6,000 thalers to equip 60 well-armed boats. The king gave his letter to the military Yesul Ivan Barabash, who headed the Cossack diplomatic mission to the royal court. Among others Cossack officers was Bohdan Khmelnytsky, who at the time was a company commander of registered Cossacks Chiharan Regiment. Other members included another Yesul Ilyas Karaimovich and regimental Yesul Ivan Nestorenko. Vladislav picked Lwow as a rallying point for the campaign against the Tatars, stocking up it with artillery. Although that may have only been a rumor, these preparations made some to believe that the king was preparing for the government overtake, and the Krakow Senate of July 1646 requested him to stop all the preparations, treating to raise that issue at the upcoming council session. Being left without the support from the parliament, Vladislav was only hoping that the Cossacks, nonetheless, were able to obtain justice for themselves with their own forces. Barabash and Karaimovich, after hearing that the king had lost his support in the Sejm, refused to follow his orders and go against the decision of the Sejm. Yet Bohdan Khmelnytsky decided to go forward with them. He was able to gain control over the king's letter and decided to take the Cossack recruiting onto himself. Barabash and Karaimovich informed about that the authorities and the Chiharan Starosta Alexander Konyspolsky set supervision over Khmelnytsky. His assistant Daniel Zarplinsky, enraged by complaint Khmelnytsky lodged against him, in 1646 made a raid on the Khmelnytsky estate village of Subotiv, killing his younger son in the Chiharan market, seized Khmelnytsky's homestead, destroyed the manor, and confiscated grain and all kinds of property. In the beginning of May 1647, the next session of the Sejm took place, at which it was planned to discuss the king's plans for war. Sometime by the end of May, Bohdan Khmelnytsky with the escort of 10 other Cossacks appeared in Warsaw. Officially, his arrival could have been explained by his will to seek justice in his case with Zarplinsky. However, in reality, the goal of his appearance in the capital was much broader. Since the time of 1646, the same remarkable changes took place, and Khmelnytsky wanted to reassure himself of the king's stance on the war with Turks. In case Vladislav still was planning to go forward, Khmelnytsky had intention to concentrate all the connections with the king and his supporters. As Barabash and Karaimovich sided with the opposition and refused the material support to realize the king king's plans. Khmelnytsky also wanted to find out whether the same would change his position to the war plans. Beside all of that, Khmelnytsky and his comrades while visiting used that opportunity to study the situation in the region and gather all possible intelligence. Although this and other accounts of Khmelnytsky's visit to Warsaw is doubted by Reshevsky, since Khmelnytsky could not have turned to the king while he was a property holder without title, but Khmelnytsky did become the target of political maneuvering, including accusations of treason and incitement of the Cossacks to revolt. Khmelnytsky's conspiracy, arrest, and bail. An important gathering took place in October 1647 near Zhovti, where Khmelnytsky reminded the public about the situation in the region, the intentions of King of Poland to start a war against the Ottomans, and how the Polish magnates counteracted those plans. He showed the king's letter that had been given to him and at the end announced that it was a good time for uprising while there were disagreements between Poles. However, the listeners were not too eager to follow those proclamations, pointing to the fact of shortage of arms, number of the Polish armed forces and other questions. On their arguments, Khmelnytsky said that it would be a good idea to ally with an outside force such as Russians or Tatars. However, Reshevsky doubts Khmelnytsky had the king's letter, viewing this account as popular legend. Sometime after the gathering, Khmelnytsky was arrested in the village of Bushin, north of Zhovti, by Radlinsky, a servitor of Alexander Konyspolsky, and was sent to Krylev. Khmelnytsky was allowed to be released on the bond of Stanislaw Krychevsky, who cautioned Khmelnytsky about the intentions of killing him. Having nowhere to turn for protection, Khmelnytsky set out for the lower Dnieper River to others who had been similarly mistreated. Khmelnytsky, making believe that he was going with his escort to Trachtamiri, suddenly turned and moved towards the Zaporizhian Sich together with his older son Timish and 20 more cavalrymen of escort. At the time, one of his friends, Fedor Lyatai, a former registered Cossack, was elected a Koshotaman. Khmelnytsky arrived to Zaporizhia sometime on December 11, 1647, where he was met by Lyatai on the Tomakuka Island. At that time on the neighboring island of Khortysia, a Polish garrison of Cherkasy Cossack regiment and a unit of dragoons headed by Colonel Gorsky were located. Upon the arrival of Khmelnytsky and his men, the preparations to the uprising went faster. Several envoys were sent to the Don Cossacks and Bakhchisarai. However, in Crimea, Tatars were skeptical of the uprising intended by Cossacks, who were suppressed by ordination of 1638, attack onto Khortysia and the organization of expedition. At the end of January, Khmelnytsky led a surprise attack onto the Khortysia garrison. Bigger part of the registered Cossacks joined the mutineers, and Colonel Gorsky, after losing over 30 people, retreated to Krylev. About that, Adam Kizil mentioned to the Putoval voivode Prince Dolgoruki. On the 4th of February the traitor Khmelnytsky attacked the Sich, where the Cherkasy regiment was standing guard, seized all the provisions, and took all the boats. After expelling the Polish garrison from the Zaporizhian Sich, Khmelnytsky sent out several agitation letters to public calling to rise up against Poles. The letters were efficient as more and more people were drawn to the Sich, accounting around 3,000 to 5,000 by the end of February. During that time, Cossacks continued to reinforce the fortifications on Busk Island. On March 15, 1648, Bohdan Khmelnytsky personally, together with his son Timish and a small company, arrived to Bakhchisarai on a diplomatic mission. Khmelnytsky presented to Khanjure the king's letter and proposed an alliance. After a few days of thinking, Jure decided to send his Mirza Tugay Bey way into the expedition with Cossacks. After that, Khmelnytsky returned to Sikh, leaving his son with the Khan as insurance. Upon arrival of Khmelnytsky, the Koshotman called from the General Council that was set for April 19. Because of the number of people attending the council, it took place just outside the Sikh itself. At the gathering, the Cossacks unanimously expressed their will for the war against Poland and an immediate expedition. Bohdan Khmelnytsky was solemnly elected the hetman. During the ceremony, the Koshotman passed down to the new hetman the banner, the standard, and the military drums, the Cossack kleinody. It was decided that only 8,000 Cossacks would go out of the Sikh, while the rest would stay put as reserves. During the preparations to the Sikh arrived the envoy of the Crown Hetman, Mykolai Potocki, wrote Mistress Khmelnytsky, who offered Khmelnytsky and Cossacks the chance to leave Zaporizhia and disperse. To that, Khmelnytsky said that it would happen if Potocki himself, together with other Polish lords, left Ukraine. Receiving such an answer, Potocki in a great hurry moved with his army south. The main element of Mykolai Potocki was quartered in Cherksey, while the Kalinovsky's regiment stayed in Korsun. Others in the estates of Crown Korozy Alexander Konyspolsky in Kanov. The whole army of the Crown, designated to suppress the uprising, accounted for less than 7,000 soldiers. Before departing the Sikh, Khmelnytsky sent out 2 Gabe with part of his unit on patrol, having the task of securing a safe passage to the Sikh 4 other volunteers. After receiving intelligence that the Polish army is heading for the Kodak fortress, Khmelnytsky decided to leave the Sikh on April 22 with his main element towards Kryliv and Chihyryn. Before the battle, around April 21–22, 1648, word of an uprising had spread through the Commonwealth, either because they underestimated the size of the uprising, or because they wanted to act quickly to prevent it from spreading. The Commonwealth's Grand Crown Hetman Mykolai Potocki and Field Crown Hetman Marcin Kalinovsky sent a vanguard of 3,000 soldiers under the command of Potocki's son, Stefan, deep into Cossack territory, without waiting to gather additional forces from Prince Jeremy Wisniewicki. Stefan's force consisted of 7 banners of dragoons, 11 banners of Cossack-style cavalry and 1 banner of winged hussars. The rest of his force was composed of about 1,500 registered Cossacks. While this group traveled by land, an additional detachment was sent down the Dnieper River in boats to join Stefan Potocki's forces in due course. These troops, under the command of Polkovnik Mikhailo Krychevsky, Stanislaw Wadowski, Stanislaw Gorsky, Ilyas Karaimovich and Ivan Barabash, were composed almost entirely of registered Cossacks and numbered at around 3,500. A unit of 5,000 soldiers remained with Hetman Mykolai Potocki while he attempted to gather local reinforcements from the various private armies of the local magnates, as well as from the Pospolite Russini of the militant Shalokta. Stefan's force arrived first at the rendezvous point. It is likely that Krychevsky, en route, contacted Bohdan Khmelnytsky, his old friend and the leader of the uprising. The battle. On April 28, 1648, Stefan Potocki's forces came upon Khmelnytsky's army in an area near the present-day city of Zhovti Vody, numbering only 3,000. The Commonwealth forces were greatly outnumbered at this point in comparison with Tatar Cossack troops of 7,000–8,000, which consisted of 800 Cossacks, as well as 6,000–7,000 7,000 Crimean Tatars under the command of Tuhaj Bej.After the first small clashes between the Polish vanguard and Tatars, scout Stefan Potocki arrived at Zhovti Vody and, advised by Jacek Simberk and Stefan Potocki, ordered his force to establish a camp in the Tabor formation, which allowed for a messenger to be sent to contact Hetman Mykolai Potocki, while they defended themselves over the next 2 weeks. The presence of the Tatars was a surprise to the Crown Army, because they did not know about the Cossack-Tatar alliance. April 29, Tatars attacked Polish troops that were before the Tabor and, after a short struggle, forced the Poles to withdraw. The retreating Poles were duly supported by the next 3 Cossack banners and possibly by other banners. The Tatars were defeated and suffered significant losses, decided not to continue the fight and withdrew. For the captured prisoners, Poles hear that the Tatars is 12,000 and soon has come more. On the hurriedly convened Council of War, Polish commanders concluded that in the face significant numerical superiority of the enemy, it was impossible to fight a battle in the open field. There were 2 options: withdraw in Tabor formation to Crimean, or remain in place in the fortified camp in anticipation of the arrival of the main force hetmans. Poles chose to remain. Under the leadership of Jan Frederick Sapieha, Poles began to fortify camp near the water. April 30 arrived the main force of Tatars, and 4 hours after the Tatars came the Cossacks. Thereafter the Poles were encircled. On that day, there was no fighting. May 1, Tatars and Cossacks decided to launch an attack from 2 sides on the Polish camp. After the initial firing of the camp, the Cossacks began their attack. They tried to distract the defenders from Tuhaj by attacking them from behind, but the Tatars were late and attacked at a time when Cossacks already withdrew. This made it possible to effectively repulse the Tatars. Later, Khmelnytsky and Tuhaj still tried to attack the Poles, but each time unsuccessfully. After a 6-hour struggles, Tatars and Cossacks suffered significant losses and retreated. On the night of May 1 to May 2, Cossacks built near the Poles the rampart and gave the cannons, but at dawn, the defenders' quick attack have gained this position and fortifications were destroyed. Began a period of blockade interrupted by frequent fighting. On May 4, 1648, near Khmelnytsky, Mikhailo Khrushchevsky's 3,500 registered Cossacks mutinied, killing all the officers. Cossacks who stayed loyal to the crown, such as Ivan Barabash, were cut down, as well as the German dragoons in the midst. Rebellious Cossacks arrived at the battlefield on May 13. The next day, Stefan Potocki saw his already undermanned force dwindle to 1,000 men. When the 1,200 registered Cossacks and some dragoons who arrived with Stefan also joined the uprising. Polkovnik Ivan Hansa is recognized as being instrumental in swaying his fellow registered Cossacks into taking Khmelnytsky's side. He created a gap in the Polish defense, attacked the Cossacks supported by Tatars, but the attack was repulsed. At this point, Khmelnytsky's army swelled to more than 11,000. Despite the overwhelming numerical superiority, gaining Polish ramparts was not an easy task, especially in the absence of heavy artillery on the side of the Cossacks. Therefore, Tatars and Cossacks decided to capture a Polish camp at Gile. On the same day, Tuhaj proposed Poles negotiations. The hetmans, with an additional 4,000-strong army, halted past Chihyrin, built fortifications. But after news of the mutiny, they retreated to the settled area to the rear and north of Chihyrin on the 13th of May. N.S. the Commonwealth army managed to hold off from being overrun. This was due in part to the superior artillery. On May 13, 1648, Khmelnytsky met with representatives of Stefan Potocki, who debated turning over their artillery in exchange for safe passage. Soon the Cossacks were sent deputies. Khmelnytsky put tough requirements. Give to Cossack cannons, banners and Commissioner Simberg. Poles agreed on everything except to give Simberg. Finally, an agreement was made. In return for the cannons, Poles had safely leave. However, after give cannons, Khmelnytsky broke the agreement, deputies imprisoned, and Colonel Krivonis escaped. The next day there was an attempt to break out of encirclement. Poles along with Tabor began to walk towards the small fortified town Kryliv. They were, however, stopped at the cost of hundreds of soldiers captured by the Tatars. The Cossacks have launched assault but were repulsed. This was followed by another assault. The fighting continued until the evening and the Cossacks were repulsed again. Poles again decided breakthrough to Kryliv. May 16, after 1 o'clock a.m. Poles managed to get out of the encircle. Tatars heard about the marching. Poles began to pursuit. Tatars attacked Poles but were repulsed. Tuhaj all night long trying to attack but without success. At dawn Polish wagons move on Zhovti. Cossacks are only now arrived at the place and began artillery fire on Poles. Tatars forced the Cossacks to stop firing because they wanted to taking as much as possible captives. Again Tatars and Cossacks rushed to the assault in which Stefan Potocki was wounded and Jan Sapieta took command, but the attack was repulsed. A moment later began the second attack, which was successful. The Commonwealth forces were surprised by a hail of arrows from Tuhaj Bej.After forces, which diverted their escape route towards the nearby fortified village of Zhovti. There the combined forces of Tatar horsemen and Cossacks under the command of Khmelnytsky's Colonel Maxim Olshansky overwhelmed Potocki's Tabor formation and thoroughly destroyed the fleeing force. 300 tourists and soldiers were taken prisoner. For the battlefield fled only one soldier, but other source says that survived more soldiers. Hetman Mykolai Potocki, who had received word on May 3, 1648, of his son's plight, could not move his forces in time to reinforce the Commonwealth's position, with his forces getting to within 100 kilometers from the site of the battle. Aftermath. The majority of the Commonwealth forces either died in battle or were killed shortly thereafter. Stefan Potocki was wounded, taken prisoner of war and died from gangrene on May 19, 1648. His advisor, Stefan Zarnitsky, was also taken prisoner, although he managed to escape soon thereafter. Bolstered by the victory, the Cossack and Tatar forces engaged with the troops of Hetman Mykolai Potocki and defeated them at the Battle of Courland. Legacy. Monuments. Distinguishing the 350th anniversary of Khmelnytsky Uprising. A monument commemorating the victory of Cossack and Tatar forces was erected near the village of Zhovti Vody, Kirovohrad, depicting two coats of arms, Bohdan Khmelnytsky's and Juray's. The monument's authors are an architect Volodymyr Schuler and a sculptor Stepan Zhelyak. In popular culture, the battle was very inaccurately portrayed in the 1999 film With Fire and Sword by Polish film director Jerzy Hoffman. Although the film paid much attention to historical details, the attempt to summarize the weeks-long battle in a few minutes meant that the battle as shown in the movie, reduced to the failed Hussars' charge, had little in common with what had really happened, especially as the Hussar forces in reality proved to be the backbone of Polish resistance during this 18-day battle. Bibliography. Holobutsky, V. Zaporozhian Cossackdom. Vyshcha Shkola, Kiev, 1994. ISBN 511-003970-4. Krashits, J. Pierzy okres buntushmirnikiego w ozwietleniu utestnika y prawi zoltwardze prachi historiczna w30 lesiejano si professor. Saint. Zashevskiego, LWOW, 1894. Doroshenko, The Outline of History of Ukraine, Volume 2, Warsaw, 1933. Kubala Elskis Historiczna, Volume 3. Chronicles of Samidlo Velichko, Volume 1.